Welcome to Drupal 414. Oh, preparing to record? Or that's you starting to record. Okay, sorry. We're going to quickly go around and do introductions. I guess say who you are, what you use Drupal for, and what you want to learn. Or what you want to get out of the group, we'll say that. So I'm David Snopek. I'm a freelance Drupal developer. And you know, I just like to hang out with other Drupal nerds. That's what I get out of this group. Oh, sorry.
I was trying to finish that. My name is John Balza. I used to do Drupal semi-professionally. Now I'm a Drupal freelance. I would say more themer than developer. I do more design and theming than kind of full-on development.
Cool. And what do you want to get out of the group?
Hanging out sounds pretty good. This is a technique that I want to do for my new portfolio site if I ever get around to doing it, so I'm just very curious about it.
Awesome.
Hi, my name is Jason. I'm also a freelance Drupal developer. I've already got, just from the time we spent before this, a ton of information. Just gathering, picking people's brains on everything Drupal. So, yeah.
I'm Glenn. I'm a marketing guy. I work for a computer hardware company, and I just like knowing more about other web techniques to sort of add to the things that I do. So I work on some Drupal sites, but most different.
Thank you.
Justin Cornell. I'm a front-end developer at Gaggle. I'm here just to keep expanding my knowledge on Drupal and chicken and mesh.
I'm Matt. I am a Drupal developer at Gaggle. This guy helped you build a product based on Drupal as a large-scale platform and acting on commerce. I'm here because I like to meet other Drupalers and talk nerdy things because there's no one else in our town that is nerdy. So that's why we're here.
Jeff?
My name is Jeff Perkins. I'm here to learn about Drupal. I've been using it for about 6 months, having a blast with it. I work for a small manufacturer. I'm basically the one-man show with a college student. We're setting up our site, doing the whole 9 yards. So here to learn, pick up some new things, see where it goes.
Awesome.
I'm Steve Hirsch. I've been doing Drupal as my full-time job for about 7 years. Next month at MidCamp, I'll be moderating a panel discussion about Headless Drupal featuring Raphael and Matt, and I want a preview of what's going to happen at that panel.
I'm Lowell Johnson. I've been a Drupal hobbyist for years, transitioning to full-time freelancer and at the same time transitioning to trying to build a web shop, gathering a team. I'm here to collaborate and talk to people and learn things. Really excited about the opportunities with Headless. And I'm really looking forward also to next month with MidCamp. Hopefully we'll get half the people here there.
You're some nice guy, huh?
Almost.
My name is Steve Hudar. Actually, my daytime, part-time job is Microsoft Systems Administrator. All that ugly stuff. I'm currently involved in a startup company called Pixelangers, which is a community-based display system. And I'm here for Drupal because I think Drupal is a good data warehouse for content, for displays. And hopefully, this guy over here, Raphael, is going to work with me to create a RESTful API to the system so that you can push content from Drupal to the display. Are we going to work on that in here, do you think? See, I'm putting him on the spot. Are we going to work on that in here by chance?
Good, anything can happen. Welcome to 414. All right, so I think I'll kick things off. My name is Raphael Travis. I'm a web developer. I work in Green Bay.
You should turn on your mic.
Like, oh, the speakers, you mean?
Or it says you're muted on my Hangout.
All right, cool. So hopefully now the Google Hangouts people can actually hear me. So just to start over, my name is Raphael Travis. I'm a web developer up in Green Bay. I work for a cellular carrier called Cellcom. And we have like this large internal system based on Drupal that I built that I hack on and develop things for. And I do all manner of Drupal development, and also I build front-end apps. And I use a lot of headless techniques to help improve communication to the various apps that we have going across the company. And I hope to really ramp this up going on in the future and connect our Drupal installation to a lot of other things and really take it to the next level. All right, so today we're talking about headless Drupal. Before I actually get into that, I want to, and I don't know if the Hangout people can see my browser screen in Safari, but I want you to take a look at this page. Okay, so this is a home page that I'll build for client.
Can you move that to your other desktop or whatever? Because we're just seeing your Evernote.
Other desktop. Well, I think I have to like share that somehow. Where is that? It made me select like a window to share.
I think there's an option to share everything. Just try enabling it again. Entire screen.
Oh, okay. There.
All right.
All right. Whoa. That's cool. All right. I like that. So.
All right.
Anyways, so let's take a good look at this page. So, okay, it's a home page for a Drupal site I built for a client.
Now we got some
static content. We're going down here, and okay. So now all of a sudden we're pulling content, right? So this is a view, and what are we looking at? Well, this is a view. So I have the view style plugin that's it's wrapping this in a responsive class. It's setting up stuff. This is inside of a panel. So I have a panel style plugin that's in the mix there, and then all this is embedded in a page template file. So it's hitting the Drupal theming system. So if we think of all, like an overview of all web developers, okay? And now all web developers are also Drupal developers. Now all Drupal developers that know panels and also that know views. Here, in order to make this relatively simple thing, you actually have to know quite a few things. And this is kind of a problem that a lot of people are running into with Drupal, is that it's so powerful that to do things, and it sometimes gets quite complicated. And once in a while, I mean, this is great. So this is a great solution to this particular instance. Having it be a view is great. Having it be in a panel is great. Everything's reusable. That's great. But a lot of sites might not be this large, or might just have different needs. Or what happens if I wanted them? Let's say if this was on a page where we wanted them to also create articles. Well, then I'd have to dip into the form API, and it gets really, really, really complicated in Drupal really, really fast. So one solution is to go to the traditional Drupal route and pipe everything through the theme layer, panels, views, form API, stuff like that. But another solution is appearing on the horizon, and that's to run it headless. So using the same example, what you could do is simply export your blog articles as a headless resource, and then have this page just be HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that just goes out, does an AJAX call, gets the content, and displays it the way you want. It would be a bit weird in this context, but that's kind of the general gist of it. Going that route, instead of having to know like 5 different things, you only have to know HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So that's one really cool thing about headless technology, is that in some cases, for some projects, it could end up being a lot simpler. Another good thing is that if you have an existing app, so this gets into, why are we talking about headless today? Well, really all this is caused by the rise of the front end. in the last year or two. All right, everything has been going crazy with JavaScript, Ember.js and Angular.js and Backbone.js and everything else under the sun JS. All that stuff has been really exploding lately, and so it just so happens that we have a lot of stuff on the client end now where we didn't before. So before, where it was totally acceptable to have everything being generated server-side like this, now suddenly if you're doing a lot of different things client-side in your app, so we're talking lots of really cool interactive forms, maybe it's pulling in content from other web services and using those together and really kind of mashing everything up. That could be a use case for it. We just have a lot going on in the client now, and this is where a headless web service can really step in. And rather than try and take your client-side app and bend it and contort it to fit into Drupal, form API or views or whatever it is that you're doing, you can simply use all of your client-side stuff on the client side and then communicate to Drupal via web service. So when we talk about headless Drupal, what exactly are we talking about? Well, technically a headless could just mean using Drupal as a web service, which simply using a Drupal web service, which we've been doing for many, many, many years. It's really nothing new. Drush, is Drush headless? Absolutely. And the third option, which I think most people, when they're talking about headless Drupal, it is this third point. They're talking about exporting something in Drupal, whether that be entities or maybe a taxonomy vocabulary or some sort of content in Drupal. They're making that available over a web service, and then they're consuming that in generally a JavaScript client-side app. And this client-side app could be anything. So JavaScript obviously is really popular, like in a web page on a website, but it doesn't really have to stop there. Your client-side app could be a desktop application that you're running on your Mac or your PC. A client could be another legacy system. So, for example where I work, we're thinking about having our old legacy application reach into Drupal via web service, pull stuff out, and use it that way. So your client really could be anything. It could be a command line application that you wrote in C, let's say, and you want to operate your website over a command line interface. You could totally do that with a web service. So why did this stuff get popular all of a sudden? Well, again, it's the rise of the front end. Now, specifically, why RESTful? So that's a question that pops up a lot. Why REST web services and not XML? Well, REST has the advantage that it uses standard methods. So these are HTTP methods for requests that you can do. And this is really kind of a big thing that a lot of people overlook, in that with HTTP, all this stuff is really already kind of done for you. So for example, let's say I had a resource, and this is a I don't know, an employee resource where I want to, make employee nodes available in Drupal. Well, chances are I want a way to view employees, right? I want a way to create new employees from the web service. I want an ability to update existing employees, and I want the ability to delete employees. So if I'm going with an XML web service, all that would have to be, generally would be some sort of custom thing that you wrote that's specific to your application. Whereas with REST, we have your standard methods: post, get, update, delete. It's already pretty much standardized, and the existing clients like Angular.js and Ember.js, Backbone, they have these methods built right in already. So for example, in Backbone, it has, on the collection object, it has a fetch method, and that just automatically does a GET request. So it's built right in. Also, web browsers, right? That does a GET request. You can test out a REST endpoint even with something like CURL or wget if you really have to. So, in this presentation, I'm going to do a few things. First of all, I'm just going to go over some existing solutions in the Drupal ecosystem for building REST APIs. Yeah.
The last, if you were using XML, you'd have to define special verbs for every class. What exactly does that mean?
Well, here I'm talking about, when I say verbs, I'm talking about like HTTP GET.
Oh.
Or HTTP post. And if you're using HTTP, you already have the standard methods, and it's all standardized across the board. And things like Backbone and Angular already have these built in. So we're talking about.
Does that make sense? Does that answer
No,
your
I use RPC in a different way, so we can talk about this stuff. This is about RESTful stuff.
Okay.
I think it's a good point though. Like with XML RPC, you define a set of methods that you just like make up the names for, right? Like get employee, set employee, delete employee.
If you're talking at the level, if you think of RPC as a transport mechanism, not as XML as the I would say the definition for the content. If you think of it just as a transport method, forget about XML, right? So the receiving service decomposes whatever is in the body of the message.
But I think that the point is with RPC, whether it's XML RPC or like Core or whatever, like you define a set of methods that you make up the names for, whereas in REST, you have a URL that is your object. If you want to delete that object, you do HTTP delete on that URL. You want to update the object, you do HTTP post on that URL. Like there's.
So I guess I don't understand what's the difference.
There isn't a difference in the end result.
Okay.
Just with RPC.
I know we have this conversation about REST and RPC, and we go around and around. We end up with the same conclusion. They both sort of like the same.
Well, they solve the same use case, but the point here is that with RPC, you're making up the definition of methods that the person using your service has to learn, whereas with REST, it's all standardized to a certain degree, right? And like if you want to deal with an object, you do it the same way, regardless of.
Yeah, so technically they're kind of.
The API is really the defining moment for any kind of, right? The structure of the API and the content is really the defining.
So for example, let's say if you want to use Backbone.js to make a JavaScript app to pull something out of a web service using XML. So you'd have to somehow make Backbone aware of the methods that you're using. Whereas with the REST, the methods are just post, get, update, delete. So it knows that stuff automatically. And just by the fact that you're using a REST endpoint, it just automatically knows about all these different CRUD operations. So that's the advantage. Backbone, Angular, all these different client-side libraries, they already support all the HTTP methods out of the gate, and they're all standardized across the board. So I think that's why, from a technical standpoint, it's really, it does the same thing as an XML web service would, but I think the key here is standardization. It's standard methods being used across the board that all these different clients also speak. All right, so back to the presentation. Go over the different solutions for web services in Drupal right now. And kind of the differences between them, just sort of brushing over that a little bit. And then I want to talk about specifically the RESTful module, which I want to focus on here, and just tell you a few things about that module. And then I actually want to walk through creating an actual RESTful resource and testing it out. All right? It's not that difficult. We can do it pretty quick, and we can get something that we can actually work with and play around a little bit and just see how it works. And then finally, for the last part, I want us to use our imaginations a little bit, and I'm going to talk about consuming our resource. So I was going to have this super cool Backbone client-side app to show you how we actually consume this in Backbone, just to kind of briefly brush over that and explain like, oh yeah, this collection just goes to this resource and does a GET request and so on and so forth. I never had time to do that, so we'll just sort of use our imagination a little bit. All right, so solutions for REST web services in Drupal. So the first big module is the services module, and I constantly search Google, you know, trying to find out, like, from a technical standpoint, what is it that these modules actually do differently, and I still really haven't been able to fully answer that question. So comparing services to RESTful, services has obviously been around a super long time. It's a very well-entrenched module in the Drupal community, and it does everything. So it does XML, SOAP, and like tons of other different things. And you know, I think the JSON endpoints and the REST endpoints are kind of just another add-on module that you sort of add on to it. I do know that it has a GUI component of some sort. I've never really actually used this module, so I'm not really sure what the differences would be between this and RESTful. I did look at some code examples online, and it looks like with services you do have to do a little bit more legwork to define your resources, because it's not, it doesn't have everything, it doesn't capture all the information from the entity API, which we'll talk about next. So RESTWS is specifically a RESTful web service module, and it's built on top of the entity API. So that's pretty cool, because you know, with the entity API, in order to define your entity, you have to define some different things about it. You know, what is the name of this entity, what fields does it have, so on and so forth. And because RESTWS is based on the entity API, it just automatically knows this stuff. So if you have entity X with, you know, field X, Y, Z, and ABC, the entity API just automatically knows how to go in and grab all the values from those fields and capture them in your resource. And it works if you're familiar with entity metadata wrapper, which is like an internal Drupal function for, you know, getting field values and stuff. That's what RESTWS is built on. So that's good. In my case, I checked it out for about 20 minutes. I checked it out and did a couple things that I didn't like. First of all, RESTWS is really, really focused on entities. So for example, if you have node entities, I found that when I enabled RESTWS, it just exported, well, it made every single node in my system exportable, right? And I've got, you know, many different content types. So if you can imagine you being a restaurant and you have, you know, a lunch menu content type or a, you know, employee content type, you know, those are content types which are completely different. And with RESTWS, I found that it would kind of treat those the same and just export everything across the board. And I think there's probably some sort of hook functions or things that you can use to sort of narrow that in a little bit. But RESTWS is really meant to be like zero configuration. You simply enable a module, and then bam, everything can be exported through JSON. Next up, we have a pretty simple solution that I think a lot of people might overlook is Views data source. So, okay, in this case, you know, I was just talking about this blog listing that I wanted to embed in this page. Now, if you want to do something really simple like that, Views data source might be a great option because you've already got views in your site. You simply enable Views data source as another display, and then, oh, bam, now I have JSON that I can use in a client-side app. So that might be a really good solution if you just want to view things. But of course, that's only one direction. So, you know, with the view, you can't turn that around and create content with the view. So in that case, Views data source wouldn't work, but it might be a good solution if you're just reading data. And then there's the actual REST module in Drupal 8. Haven't really done anything in Drupal 8 yet. Not really sure how this module works. I do know that it's somewhat similar to RESTWS. I'm assuming it's built on top of the entity API. So a lot of these solutions are probably pretty similar. Okay, so I'm going to focus on the RESTful module. So this module is meant to be, it's focused on developers. So it's meant to be code only. So one of the things I found with services and with RESTWS is that in order to do really simple things, I had to dive into code anyway. And so if we're going to start coding anyway, why not just have everything be code-based? And that's exactly what the RESTful module is. You define a plugin, so it's like 20 lines of code, and you just sort of type in what fields you want in your plugin, and then bam, you have a web service. The RESTful module is not a toy. It's meant to be very, very full-featured. All right, so it's got pretty much everything that you could want in a best practices RESTful API. So it supports rate limiting, it supports versioning, it supports caching, permissioning, and everything is done in code. So if you want to get really complicated, you can express things in code very, very easily. It's also based on the Entity API. So pretty much, everything is as simple. I'll show you this in a moment, but if you want to define a field for your particular node, so let's say you have, you're a pizza restaurant, you have different, pizzas that you want to export as a web service, and every pizza has different toppings. With the RESTful module, it's very easy in your plugin definition to say, okay, this field I want to be named that, and it's going to map to, field pizza topping or something. Very, very easy. So if you've ever done anything as a developer with the Entity API or specifically entity metadata wrappers, like this is very, very, very simple. I just touched on best practices a little bit. Another important thing is that you can chain resources together. So I really, really, really like this. In my case, I was building my system at Cellcom, and I had a trouble ticket content type. So I have a trouble ticket node, and one of its fields is a device, where you link this trouble ticket to a specific device, and then that device has like a device ID and a make or model, like if it's an iPhone or not. So normally, in your trouble ticket resource, that would just be like the entity ID of that resource, right? Because it's an entity reference field that's going to that device. But here, I've already got that device defined as a resource itself. So with RESTful, I can just put in another resource property underneath it to tell it that it's already been defined as a resource. And then everything that I've defined for that resource, all the permissions and the fields and everything, go together in with the trouble ticket resource. So in that way, you can kind of chain together entity references just like you can with Entity API.
So that will return the whole object instead of just the resource URL?
Okay, if you don't specify a resource, so let's say if I have trouble ticket, and okay, so one of its fields is an entity reference field that's going to a device. So let's say if I just have the trouble ticket resource defined, nothing else. In that case, it's going to give me that entire blob, that entire device object.
Okay.
Instead, if I define a device resource and then I tell it that, oh, this field links to this resource, it hooks into what I've already defined and shows me that instead.
It's like a link, right? Like a link to the other resource.
Or will it provide the whole object?
It will actually, it'll give you the whole object that you've defined.
Oh, okay. RESTWS. That's the heartache. That's my headaches with Drupal.org's API. Is it's RESTWS, and it's like it returns the URL, the resource ID, so you can build and do another query. But it's like
exactly, and that's why this is so important because then so I do a query to get all these nodes, and they're all related to other nodes. So I have to go in every single one, iterate through it, fetch that new endpoint, iterate through that, and what if those have references too, right? I mean, I've got references like crazy.
There's solutions to this problem, right? So if you have a RESTful library, it can dereference those for you automatically. If you set up a cache on your end that remembers like things you've queried before, it can take a lot of the overhead away. Mm-hmm. And there's advantages to having lots of links and having full objects, right?
Yeah, well, I think RESTful will give you both.
It lets you like pick and choose which approach you want to go.
Yeah, I believe it has with every object that it outputs. It provides a self link, which is the URL for whatever resource that is. And I'll show you more of that once I actually get into it. It's pretty cool. And then the other stuff I talked about, pagination is also pretty cool. So, you know, in my Backbone app, you can actually have it paginated on the server side. You know, if I know that it's going just to that specific client, you can just have your Backbone collection just say, oh, get this resource, page 1, bam, that's my collection. Also, we've got some other stuff in there. If we have time, I'll be sure and just play around with it. It's, you know, really that's what it is. You just play around with it and see what it can do. Okay, so let's get into this. Okay, a REST endpoint of 5 minutes. Okay, maybe 10. So here's my test site. All right, so here's a vanilla Drupal 7 test site that I just made before going here. So it has one content type, a presentation content type, where it's just listing out, and this is a view, so it's just listing out different presentations that we might have at Drupal 4.1.4. In addition to these presentations, every presentation is linked to a location. All right, so a location is a taxonomy, and the taxonomy terms, so like room MA29, so that's a taxonomy term in the location vocabulary, and these taxonomy terms all have a field which tells you how many seats that room can hold. So pretty simple. All right, presentation is linked to a location, and a location has all this different stuff underneath it. So let's make a REST endpoint for these presentations. How do we do it? So a good place to start is the RESTful module README. And keep in mind the RESTful module is developed on GitHub because it makes it really easy to collaborate and pull in requests, do things like that. And we spent a lot of time making really good README files that really explain to you, like, okay, do this, this, and this. All right, you're done. So we need a couple things to make this work. First of all is the entity API. That's obviously very important. RESTful is built on the entity API, so we need to install it first. So we need the entity API, and we need the dev version because there are 2 patches that we need to patch an entity API before RESTful will fully work. It will work on stock entity API in some cases, but if you're doing things where you're creating nodes using your endpoints, you're going to need these 2 patches for sure, and I believe one of these got committed already. So you install the dev version of entity API and then apply whichever one of these patches hasn't been committed yet, and then you're good to go. So then you install the RESTful module, and then you can get started. So when you install the RESTful module, it's very different from REST-WS in that, you know, when you install REST-WS, everything is exported 0 configuration, and RESTful takes the other approach that when you install RESTful, nothing happens. All right, nothing happens until you declare a RESTful resource plugin in a module someplace. All right, so this is pretty simple, and in fact, you know, if you're setting this up for the first time, we've actually got some code right here that you can just copy and paste into some files and get rolling. So let me show you what this looks like. So here's my Drupal 4.1.4 RESTful module, and let me open it up in my actual text editor. So we have Drupal 4.1.4 RESTful.info. So it's a .info file. Just type in the name of the module and, you know, this other basic information. And then you also need a .module file, and the only reason that you need this file is simply to tell ctools where you're going to have your plugins. So all the RESTful plugins that you define are loaded in via ctools. And so here I'm just saying, all right, all of my RESTful plugins are going to be in plugins/RESTful. All right, so that's the only reason why you need that .module file there, other than the fact that it has to be there. All right, so here's our plugins folder and RESTful. And I like to keep myself organized, so I have a separate folder for every different resource I'm going to define. And these folders can be any number of nested levels, and CTools is still going to be able to find them. So a lot of people that use RESTful, you'll see them, they'll have another layer of folders in here. RESTful supports versioning. So, let's say if you have version 1.0 of your resource, and you have a bunch of clients using that, and now you want to upgrade it to 1.1, but you don't want to break all those other clients, you can simply define another version. And so a lot of people, if they have separate versions, you'll see that other folder layer in here where they would have like presentation, v1.0, v1.1, so on and so forth. Okay, so we're already halfway done with this plugin. The other thing that we need is a .inc file, and that just describes the CTools plugin that we're making, and we need a class file, and this file contains the actual class that does the work. So let's look into these and just see how they work. So a presentation.inc. Okay, so here, pretty simple, all right? So we're defining an array, and very simple stuff. What label do you want this resource to be? This resource key, that is basically the URL. So what URL do you want this to be at? And keep in mind, this is going to be prefixed by the API version and also the string API, which I think to make that configurable in the future. So in this case, this resource is available at drupal7.dev/API/v10, which is the default version, /presentation. All right, and this is the name that you use to refer to this resource when you're doing chaining. So in this case, I have the presentation is pointing to the location resource, and so that's just the name that I would give it if I wanted to refer to it. Entity type, we're exporting nodes. The bundle is the presentation bundle. So this is another very important thing about RESTful. It doesn't really care about entities so much. It cares about bundles. So if you have 50 different content types, chances are all those content types are pretty different from each other, and so it treats them in special ways based on the bundle. And then of course, description. So this is important, and this just tells it what class is actually going to do the work for this actual plugin that you're defining. All right. So in this array, and that just kind of gives us some information about this resource. And now we go to the real workhorse, and this is the class file. Okay, so this is the most difficult thing with RESTful, especially for someone who's never worked with it before. You've never seen it. You want to define your own resource. How do you do it? And that is knowing which class to extend. So the pattern here is that you make your new class, and notice this is the same class that I referenced here, and you have that extend one of our entity classes, or in fact there's more classes that you can extend as well. If you want your resource to be like this totally custom database query, you can do that. If you want your resource to be like a variable or something, there's a lot of different data providers that we've had, and I'll show you those in a second. So how do you know what to type in here for your class? Well, you look inside the RESTful module. So here, actually I'll go to this in my file manager so you can really see it. So here I'm inside of the RESTful module directory, and so we can have we have RESTful.module, RESTful.info, and then we look inside plugins and RESTful. Okay, so here are all of our different classes, and you can see that we have a DB query class to extend. We have a node class you can extend. We have taxonomy class that you can extend. So depending on what entity you're working with, it should be kind of clear what class you need to extend here. Obviously, if you want to export your users over a resource, you probably want to extend the user class. If you're exporting a taxonomy term, you probably want to extend the taxonomy term class. So it should be pretty simple. If you have some sort of custom entity or something you don't see here, a good one to extend is just the base entity field query class, just to go right off the entity API. You got a question, Lowell?
Do you know if there's a views class? Or is there another way?
No, actually, and you know, you wouldn't have a views class with this. So this takes the place of doing the query that views would normally do. So what you would do in that case, instead of using a view, you would extend a DB query class. And then, yeah, you just use a custom query that you just type, you know, select all from blah, 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 you know, join table. These are the classes. So these are the actual, like, we call them data providers. So if you have something in Drupal that you want to export as a resource, this is what kind of stands between Drupal and your resource. It's the data provider for RESTful. So I'm just showing you this just so that you can kind of know what class to extend up here. So that's the whole point of this, is that we want to, you know, we want to extend off of these classes because everything's already done for us. All right. So here I extend the presentation resource off of RESTful entity-based node because my resource is a node. I declare what fields I want, and then bam, done. That's it. So public fields info is the main method that you would use, and this is where we just define what fields we actually want to export from the presentations. So, you know, a presentation might have a few different fields, right? It might have 10 different fields, and maybe some of that stuff we don't want to share. So in this case, we're specifically defining what fields we do want to share, and also what the name of that field is going to be when it's sent over to the client. For example, you know, one thing I don't like about REST-WS is that when your data is sent over to the client, it has all this Drupal-y stuff mixed in with it. Like if you're exporting fields on a node, let's say your fields are, you know, field location and field capacity. Okay, so REST-WS, those would always come over as field underscore, you know, location and field underscore capacity. And in the case of REST-WS, I can specifically decide, you know, okay, just call that location, or I can name it whatever I want, basically. And this is why I like this approach of doing everything in code and explicitly declaring everything. Okay, so here, this is pretty simple. So here I want to have a public field named length, for the length of the presentation, and I'm mapping that to field minutes. All right, here I want to send, so these presentations have pictures associated with them, and so here I want to send a picture field over to the client, and I want that to map to field image. Another thing that's really cool about RESTful is it supports image styles. So in this case, I specifically want to send over the large image style, and it'll send over the link for that image. So that way, if you're doing responsive design, you can actually have the client grab the right size image, you know, rather than grabbing the you know, huge one and having to scale it down. It can just automatically grab the small one that it actually needs.
So you could do like a public field of thumbnail and then send over the thumbnail image style and then just the regular image style.
Yeah, and in fact, I'll show you how this all looks on the client in a minute, but it actually sends over everything in one big gob. So you'd have, you know, field picture, and then its associated properties, and then you'd have, like, you know, large image style, thumbnail listed right underneath that image.
Okay.
And so then here you're just limiting which image styles will send. Like you said only large, so it's only going to send large. But if you
right.
large and thumbnail, it can send both.
Absolutely. So that's something I really liked, especially for responsive design. That's always something I struggle with, like all these stupid images. You know, you have an iPhone that's going to be 400 pics wide, and then you know on desktop that's going to expand to like 1,000 pics. Well, you know, what size image do I send the client? And this is cool because you can use JavaScript on the client, or you know whatever your client is, and just have the client get the right image size based on what it reads as the screen size. Okay, so that's pretty cool. And I also, before we go over to the client, I just want to show you this resource. So this is what I was talking about before about chaining resources. So here I have each presentation is pointing to a location, and this location is already defined as a resource. So here, all the work that I've already done to define that location resource, and I'm just going to plug in my computer again. There we go. Okay, so nothing fancy here. I just wanted a location. I just wanted the location resource to give us the number of seats that every location has. But after I've done this work, I don't have to do it again. So I simply reference that, okay, this field location is actually a location resource. And when I view this resource in the client, which I'll show you in a second, it'll automatically go into the resource that you defined and set it up the way that you defined it.
I have a question. Does this, if you throw an exception, does it come back through the same API, or do you need a server side on the client in order to get this done?
Okay, so if something goes wrong, it's actually going to send a very detailed error message back to the client.
The most important thing is sending an HTTP status code too. So it'll be a 400-something code with the exception. Like if you send bad parameters, what is that, like 405? I don't know.
Yeah, I get them mixed up all the time.
But like it'll give you, some blob of data, but it'll also give you a HTTP error code. Which,
yeah, and if something went like really, really wrong server side, I mean, then you just get an exception, and depending on where the error occurred,
But is there,
it may not get that far.
Of exception messages that are supported, as opposed to a return from the service that there's an error? Because you want to encapsulate the context when you see the error, so you can't fix it.
like this API will return JSON, because that's whatever you gave as your accepts or whatever when you made the request. So if it's a good request, you get the HTTP error code 200, and then whatever data you asked for. If something went wrong, you'll get a HTTP error code, and then that JSON that you get is meant to represent the error.
But it's not defined. There's no API that's defined for the error. You just get some stuff.
Well, it depends. So like I'm sure RESTful does something standard-y. But is it? I mean.
No,
So if you're using the RESTful model,
so,
you would know what to expect in the case of an error.
Not necessarily, because if there's an error downstream from the service, unless it's captured and fed to you, you won't know.
I just mean like the format of the error. It's like I don't think there's a REST standard for error properties, but
Not that I know.
I'm sure that RESTful, the module, will send like a message.
Yeah,
back
I'll talk about this. You guys do this. I'll play with the problems.
Sure thing. So yeah, and just to briefly brush over this. I mean, I don't want to go into too much marketing stuff with RESTful, but yeah, I mean, we do have tons of exception classes, which are probably more what you're thinking of, and these are just standard ways that the RESTful module itself handles it when things go wrong. So we've got lots of exceptions, and also we've got other totally cool stuff that you can do. We have different formatters, and also different types of authentication that you can do. Like you can do just basic auth, you can do token auth, and any of this stuff you can extend with your own plugins if you need to do something weird. Okay, so what does this actually look like? Well, I'm going to hop over to my HTTP client. So this is a client on OS X. It's called PA. I really like it, and basically I've just pointed it at my API, and I'm going to do a GET request. So let's see what all this stuff looks like. Okay, so first of all, let's look around at what's provided in the response. Okay, so this is the response over here, and we've got a few things. So we've got a count of the total results, and we've got this array called data. So all of the actual results are wrapped in what's called an envelope. So we're wrapping everything in an envelope called data. So here's all of our results. And this self property is pretty interesting. So here's where now we're going to return the actual URL of whatever resource was requested. And then also next, this is a paginated resource. So right in the response, you'll notice that we're returning 5 items here, and so it will give you the link to reach the next set of results. All right, so let's look at our data. Okay, so I'm looking at a presentation right now. So it's going to give me the, in this case, the NID. In this case, give me the title. And here's that self link again. So it's going to give me a link to whatever to that specific node. So here, we will follow that through and go get it. So for example, if I get my location resource, this data here and the data that's in here are one and the same. And then here's our picture field that we defined before, and I don't have that defined specifically as a resource, so it's just giving me a bunch of stuff. And here are the image styles that I've told it to give me. Okay. Or what you would do in different situations. Any questions about authentication or permissions, any of that, or do you guys pretty well get the gist of it?
Does all the REST stuff come with it too?
Yeah. In fact, I'm using very simple GET requests here, but yeah, all of these endpoints. Okay, so RESTful supports all of the HTTP methods. So here I'm just in GET, but you could also post. So if I posted to a presentation, and in my body I sent it a JSON array of label blah blah blah, length blah blah blah, topic blah blah blah, and I sent that post request to it, it will create that node in the system. Just keep in mind, GET requests by default are wide open, so anybody can view a resource. But in order to create a resource, that's a little bit more locked down by default. So you would also need to send some authentication with it, like a username and password to log into Drupal, because obviously you don't want random people just creating a bunch of stuff. So million things that you can do with this. Because we're already in code already. Declaring a REST endpoint is pretty simple. It's just the 4 files: your module file, your plugin definition file, plugin.inc, and then your actual class, where you extend off of RESTful and then put in your own custom stuff. Okay, so here we're going to kind of like the mystery land, the imagination. I'm supposed to have this like app ready for you guys. Oh my God.
That's really cool.
Drupal 4.14. For some reason, like this just broke. For no reason. I have no idea why. I don't even think I can display it for you. Bam. I don't know. But anyways, like, okay, like the RESTful stuff, it's cool because you can get really creative with it. Like I said before, it's just standard HTTP stuff. So you can install extensions that will allow you to operate your API. If you're good with like Objective-C or something, you can consume your API in the iPhone app. You know, CURL right from the command line. You can pass some options of how to do that in the actual that I just showed you. Really cool is that once your resources are sort of free from Drupal and all of its conventions and theming layers and views and plugins, you're free to do whatever you want.
So when you were working on the Backbone thing, did you go through any cool like Backbone demos or something really actually client side we could just like show so we could see something client side cool?
Okay, so the coolest thing I've got for you right now, I have this app we're using at Cellcom, right? Where, you know, our administration people at Cellcom, they're using this system and they're putting in, they have taxonomies where they, every time we get a new phone model that we're selling, they go into this Drupal system, add that model, and then we have all these client-side apps for training. So these type things that really fast, they answer a bunch of questions and then tells them what to do. So what I've been doing is exporting these different vocabularies. So previously what I did is I had like this file of models that I would manually update every time we got a new one in. I'd go and just manually copy and paste this file in 5 different places. So obviously, like, you know, I'd just not do it, or, you know, no one would tell me what's being released, and, you know, it's manual, so it just takes a bunch of time, and it's just bad in general. So now, and okay, this just mysteriously broke today as well. So I can't actually show you, but just in your imagination, actually, this is the tool right here. Oh, okay, I guess it's... Okay, there it is. So yeah, this is kind of what it is. So if you can just imagine us like typing stuff in here and having it actually work. What it's going to do is, you know, the taxonomy vocabularies are being exported by Drupal. So this client-side program, you know, instead of having like them hard-coded in the actual application, all that gets compressed to one call to this web service. Right? It just does a GET request to that resource. It pulls in all the taxonomy terms, and it just arranges them in a select list for the user. And so that way, when the admin people add stuff in Drupal, all these client-side apps get it. And that's just in a read context. So we're also doing another one where, you know, they fill out one of these decision trees, and at the end of it, you know, when they click submit, it actually goes in and it actually creates a trouble ticket in our Drupal system, right from the training tool. So, you know, my intention was to have some super cool actual like things that you could see, like, oh yeah, look at that, that's awesome. And I don't know that I have any. Yeah, this was my last hope, and it just bombed on me. So imagination. Just imagine it being cool.
Do you want like contribute Kanban.com?
Yeah, that's cool. Totally, yeah.
Because I just think it's funny that like all this is coming together, because at the new year I found AngularJS and got really bored, so I made tools with it, and one of them is contribute Kanban.com. Because all of my contributive work, I hate trolling the issue queue, and I like Kanban boards. So this touches the Drupal.org API. And the reason why it takes so slow is and or operations are horrible. So it's actually doing multiple queries for each tag, for each status in each list. So that's why it's so.
Querylicious.
So at what point is this going to have write support where I could use this to
when they allow it. I wish it would. I would love it if you could just drag and drop.
That'd be so cool, man. Like, see the queue and move stuff around. And
so like this is HTML and JavaScript, it's Angular, and it's fetching from D.O. And that's like everything he demoed, which is using REST.us. And I'm officially sold on RESTful now as being the, like, yeah. is we use services, and I had to write a patch because node creation wasn't setting a form state or like the form generated properly. So it like
yeah, okay. Now
I wrote somewhat of a collection of services patches the last time I did a services project. We could all get together.
okay, so if you guys use services, somebody said that it actually uses the form API.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ugh.
That's what I had to patch because it wasn't setting a form
So,
state.
unfortunately, in Drupal 7, not everything is fields. And this was a much bigger problem in Drupal 6, where like nothing was fields.
Yeah.
You had to submit the form to catch like all the stuff.
That just scares me.
Right.
So RESTful
was the only API.
Yeah, so with RESTful, everything is hitting the entity API directly. There's no form API or anything in between.
We wrote our own resources that are straight to the end of the API. So I mean, you can do that, but like by default, it's like etc.
Yeah, so a contrib Kanban. So this is pretty cool. Just imagine doing this within Drupal. Like, how would you even do this? I mean, I don't know. You know, have some sort of view of some sort. I don't even know. It'd be bad. It'd be bad. All right. So this is why we have RESTful services.
This could be a role plugin. What's the step up from
Style.
style plugin that does group by? There's a Kanban board. You could do it.
I mean, that's the thing. You can do it. Like, you can do stuff with the form API and the views and stuff. But oh my God, why would you?
So this is built with RESTful?
No, this is just built with Angular, and it's Drupal.org. If you go to Drupal.org/API, they're using REST-WS to expose everything. Like you said, you turn it on, it's just like
You're grabbing this with RESTful.
I'm grabbing this with Angular. Yeah, but they're exposing it through REST-WS. But yeah, like said, you turn it on, it's everything.
Yeah. So like, is there like a hook function or something you use to like stop that or what?
I didn't dive into it.
I mean, I saw that. I'm like, okay, this module's not for me.
Because when I was originally building this, I was going to have to be a Drupal backend that communicated with Drupal.org so I could put it to data more.
Yeah.
I was like, no, maybe they should just highlight the issues with Headless Drupal instead of being let's find a way to work around it by having this tap into a Drupal site that taps into a Drupal site.
Yeah.
So, like, access origin. That's one thing. That wasn't on Drupal.org. This was broken.
Oh wow, yeah. Hey, just in case anyone here is thinking about doing this, I do want to show you that.
That's a really good thing.
Just as like a quick thing, just because it's going to drive you crazy. So if we go into web services, all right. So there's security built into web browsers, right? So in general, if you have like a JavaScript running on your web browser and it's trying to grab something from another domain, they'll do that. It's not secure. So basically, in Drupal 7 and possibly something in Drupal 8, you just install this module called the cores module, and there's other ways to do it. You can do it through htaccess or however you want, but the simplest option is just to install the cores module. And all I'm going to tell you about this, if you are just testing and you just want to make it work, install the cores module and put *pipe* here. That's it. And then it will work.
With the RESTful GitHub repo in the main folder, is that like your business where they have like the project workflow of client and then backend?
Okay, they've got some crazy stuff. Okay, so this is just run.
That actually does unhooking it and adds the headers across the board.
Yeah, I saw that.
In V8, if you're going to try to use the PHP library, I did this and it broke because I had used Composer Manager and I actually tapped in the Primetime Cores PHP library into the services, but it required Composer to auto-load it. And at that point in time, Composer wasn't bootstrapped early enough, so it broke. It killed V8, and I was kind of stuck in like an boarded state. But apparently, Composer Manager OAN has it now where it can work without Drupal even having to be bootstrapped yet, so it might be fixed. So V8 cores, you might not need a contrib module. You should be able to pull a contrib to add that service.
Yeah, so I guess the moral of the story, if you want to just try this out and play around a little bit, watch out for cores. You're going to get the error in your console and be like, what the hell is this? It's cores. I warned you.
And don't Google how to bypass it, because and don't think about trying to hack around JSON.
Anything else before we wrap up?
Let's open up to.
Yeah, let's open up questions to any of the virtual participants. If anyone has something they want to ask Raphael, just unmute yourself and ask away.
We had 3, now we're down to 2. We're getting there.
All right, cool. Sounds like there's no questions.
All right, peace out.
Thanks, Raphael.
Thank you very much.